right, welcome in class. Let's say you have an object here, and let's say it's a person and he's looking this way. How would you describe something that is here? I think you would say that is above him. How would you describe something that's down here? You would say it's below. Now let's say you have something that's right here. Sorry. You would say that would be in front of him. So what is this? What does that actually mean? Well, describing these words specifically are prepositions. So today we'll be learning about prepositional phrases. They're extremely important in English and help in understanding and identifying other grammar rules. And we'll learn how prepositional phrases to work, how to identify them, and how to use them. All right? And off to our lesson objectives. So the first thing we want to be able to do is to identify prepositional phrases, describe their function in sentences, and you also should be able to understand and identify the difference between adjectival and adverbial prepositional phrases. Now, so these are some beginner examples. If you haven't gone over these phrases before, or maybe ever, then you probably won't understand them. But let's say the ceiling above our heads creaks continuously. Now, going over that introduction, if we say something was above, it would be above our heads. So that would be our prepositional phrase in this case. She found her keys under the table. Be under the table. So what these prepositional phrases do is describe where something is taking place, the location, the time, what it's made of, anything like that. It's a description normally. So the ceiling above our heads. Which ceiling? The ceiling above our heads. Creak continuously. So prepositional phrases aren't entirely necessary in a sentence. If I took this out completely, I could say the ceiling creaked continuously, and that's a perfectly normal sentence. Now if I say she found her keys and took out under the table, we would still have she found her keys, which works perfectly fine. So in the next example, Jack's dog was on top of the doghouse. If you've been following, you would probably understand it would be on top of the doghouse. Where was Jack's dog? Answering the question of where or direction, on top of the doghouse. Now these specifically can't really remove. If I took this out and said Jack's dog was, what was he? So sometimes you need them, sometimes you don't. And he is a native of Greece. This one is a little bit harder, but it would be of Greece. He is a native of where? So that would be of location. So let's go on to our main point. Learning to define prepositional phrases and understanding the difference between adjectival and adverbial phrases. Let me fix this a little bit so y'all can see me a little better. All right, guys. So, learning to define prepositional phrases, understanding the difference between adjectival and adverbial phrases. So, prepositional phrases. It's a phrase which contains a preposition, which would be of, on, around, below, above, anything of that kind, next to, in front of, behind. Any of those are prepositions. And an object of the preposition. So, if we go back to he is a native of Greece, it would be the preposition would be of, and the object of the preposition would be Greece. He's a native of Greece. He is on top of the doghouse. He is under the table. And that's back to that. Anyway. So, their function is to show the relation between words in a sentence by indicating, as said before, time, location, or direction. So examples, the ship disappeared beyond the horizon. This would be an example of location, disappeared beyond the horizon. Could also be an example of direction, Both of them work similarly. The child threw the ball over the fence. Same thing. So, next, feel like you know prepositional phrases pretty well. Let's go the difference between adverbial and adjectival. So an adjectival in itself is a modifier of a noun and answers the questions of which or what sort. So an adjectival can be anything that describes a noun. So we're going to apply that to prepositional phrases, so what we've already learned. So we know an adjectival modifies a noun, so this would just be a prepositional phrase that modifies a noun. So an example, the house made by Jack. A dog on the counter, right? So it's the saying you have a dog that is on the counter. You're describing the dog. Think about what it's describing. So the house made by Jack, right? It is describing a house. House and dog, both nouns. So this would be adjectival. Think of it as an adjective, which you know, you should know, maybe you don't, but adjectives describe nouns. So an adverbial, if you can't tell, modifies a verb and answers questions such as when, where, why, and how. You know, the big W's and the one H. The group ran across the town. So the group ran, where did they run? Across the town. You would already be able to identify that the prepositional phrase is across the town. So all we have to do is, what is it describing? They went across the town. What did they do? They ran. So that would be adverbial. Ran is a verb, to run, the infinitive form. An owl flew down the street. So an owl flew down the street. There's our prepositional phrase. What are we describing? We are describing down the street. What did it do? It flew down the street. Now, you might question, well, isn't it describing where the owl went? As we said, the location. Well, not necessarily, because the owl flew. So that's what the owl is doing. You're not saying the owl down the street. That would actually be a form of an adjectival. But if you say an owl down the street, you're describing where the owl is. So it could be that way, but since we have this verb between them, it's an adverbial because this verb is what's being described by down the street. Or if you change the way the sentence is structured, an owl down the street flew, then it would be, as you said, describing the owl, and that would be adjectival. So let's go to our last points, our last examples, and try and put it all together. We're going to identify the prepositional phrase and whether or not it is adverbial or adjectival, and identify what it is describing. So the man threw his hammer over the roof. As you can probably tell, over the roof. So the man threw his hammer over the roof. What did he do? Threw. You might say, why isn't it hammer? We're not saying the hammer over the roof, because then you'd be describing which hammer, the hammer over the roof. No. Over the roof is describing through. How did he throw his hammer? Where did he throw his hammer? Over the roof. So, since it's describing a verb, it would be adverbial. So this one we can mark as adverbial. So I'll put it like that. So, the sun began to rise in the sky. We know in the sky would be our prepositional phrase. So what is it describing? Would it describe sun? The sun in the sky. Well, not necessarily. There's a little bit of information between that makes it not describe the sun. So it's not the sun began in the sky. Not quite. It began to rise in the sky. So if it's describing to rise or rise is a verb. So this would be adverbial. She ran quickly and disappeared over the hill by the lake. So she disappeared over the hill by the lake. So what would this be describing? What went over the hill? She went over the hill. What is that all? Not quite. She ran quickly, okay, and disappeared over the hill. So it's not saying she's over the hill, but necessarily that she disappeared over the hill. So again, this would be adverbial. So what did she do? She disappeared over the hill. He soon found the idol of gold. This one's a little bit tricky, but as I said, it can also be what it's made of, the properties of something. So this one is of gold. There's our prepositional phrase. What are we describing? Not he, not found, but idol. The idol of gold. So this one's going to be adjectival. They started running in the morning. When did they start running? You can always ask those questions, that kind of thing. He found the idol. What kind of idol? Of gold. That's how you can help find your prepositional phrase. So they started running in the morning. Because what did they do in the morning? They started running. Running is going to be a verb. So this phrase is going to be adverbial. Let's see how we're doing. Yes. All right. So in conclusion, now you know what a prepositional phrase is, how they work in a sentence, and the difference, and do it again, the difference between adjectival and adverbial phrases. As we know, the adjectival, sorry about that. Adjectival is describing a noun. Adverbials describe verbs. Knowing these can help you to begin to understand more deeply. It can help you learn fundamental grammar rules by learning this specific part of grammar. And thank you for being in my class.